Hello everyone, it's decklist. We are playing the Temur Hollow 1 list again. Okay, so this is my list. Um, I already have a lot of videos of this list on my channel, so you can go find those previous videos if you're interested in a longer deck text and to hear something about it. I will be quick about this one and just go to the gameplay as soon as possible. So let's just say that this is uh, this is a pretty aggressive version of a deck that doesn't play the Asmo package, which can significantly slow the deck down, but still plays the Urborg Lurgoyf uh, as a card that can generate very good value in this deck, either by playing a turn 1 Hedron Crab into turn 2 Lurgoyf, already making him a huge attacker on turn 3 and 4. Which can also get flying with Wonder and just become a very powerful threat in a lot of matchups. Also, this card is enabler that can often win games against blue-red decks by itself by just becoming too huge for them to deal with. Bolt, Unholy Heat, and all their removal they play, the damage-based removal. So this card paired with Hedron Crab has a very high potential in a deck like this. Also, you're using Burning Inquiry, Insolent Neonate, and Street Raids, and a lot of these cards like Goblin Lore to fill your graveyard with cards, and most cards in your deck are creatures. So Urbal Gurgoyf grows very fast, very large, and I think it's a very good threat in this deck. Okay, so um, on the sideboard, the only change from the last list is addition of 2 Flame Tongue Yearling, which is, I think, very good way to deal with Doughty Voidwalker. It is also a cheap creature that can be used to trigger the Vengevine, and it can also be used with multi-kicker kicker when needed. Of course, there is some Artifact Enchantment hate, Blood Moons, Furies, Graveyard hate, and that's it. We can go to the gameplay. Okay, so this is the first league. The first match was defeat. So we'll start with all the wins and then with the defeat in the end. Okay, so playing second here, I have pretty good hand. Double Neonate plus Vengevine, it's always good. So I decide not to play anything here. I want to hold cards in my hand because of I have the double Neonate, so I want to use get the maximum value out of it. Also want to hold cards in my hand so I can use the Goblin Lore on the next turn. I play the double Neonate, of course, get the Vengevine, but opponent bounces my Vengevine, so I can't really attack here, and they use the Fury to kill my Neonate, which wasn't really a good move. I discarded again my Vengevine, and decided to trigger the Vengevine again with double creature, Blazing Grotwala plus the Urborg Gurgoyf. They had a dispute, but I did get my Vengevine back. Attack for 4, and had another one in hand, plus 2 Goblin Lores. So my opponent trades with Vengevine here, but I was able to play 2 creatures and bring the Vengevine back, so I was in a pretty good situation. I had another Vengevine here. My opponent attacks with Charles. That wasn't probably a very good move, but yeah, they had another Rhinos. But I was the attacker here, and I got my Vengevine back and played the Urborg Lurgoyf, which was huge, 7-8, and pretty hard for my opponent to deal with without endurance. And that was it. Okay, so let's check out the game 2. The Rhinos matchup was usually favored so far for me, but the only loss in this league was against my second game against Rhinos. Opponent just had I just had very bad hands in game 2 and 3. Okay, so had the double adept here plus burning inquiry. That can be pretty aggressive if my opponent doesn't have fury. Of course, fury can be a blowout for this type of hand. Opponent goes for the Charlotte's Agent. Get the rhinos on the field, and now I start doing my thing. I grow my adepts to 6-2, and I fill my graveyard. I'm able to cast the Ox, but I don't want to exile the Vengevine, so I attack first for I want my adepts to die, of course. Then I discard the Rootwalla from my hand, which is a second creature, to trigger my Vengevine, and now my opponent uses the Endurance. They probably didn't notice at that situation that I'll be able to cast the Ox of Agonas. They should have played it before. But yeah, it was good for me. Okay, so at this situation I get the 4th land here and decide to cast the Vengevine immediately, attack with everything. Opponent goes for the bounce and the block. They did have a Fury, but now I had Urbor Gurgoyf with the kicker ability. And I made it. I kicked it once. Didn't really want to shock myself there, so I just played it for 3 mana. My opponent, I wanted to use the Ox anyway, so I went for the attack with the. I went for the attack with the Goyf, and I really wanted Goyf to die because playing Ox would shrink him. Anyway, so I played the Ox here, bring back Vengevine, and because I played the Adept before, so and my opponent is on 0 cards in hand and concedes, so that was the game. Okay, let's check out the next game. Match 2, and win number 2. I was playing a second here. I had 2 lands, only 1 neonate, but it was keepable. Lot of Rootwallas here. I have 2 Furies on my sideboard, which are very good in this matchup. So I go for the redraw with the neonate, put Rootwalla on the field, and block a creature. I'm looking for more enablers here, like Burning Inquiry, Goblin Lore, stuff like that. Burning Inquiry especially can mess up with their hand. My opponent has the creature plus Bushwhacker in this situation, which puts me on a 3 life. And I was able to play 2 creatures here, which means I can survive the next turn, but I'm not in a really good situation overall. I go for blocks here, survive on 1 life, but my opponent top decks a Gleeful Demolition for 3 more tokens, and that is definitely it. So let's check out the game 2. Okay, so this is decent hand. I went decided to go for the adept on turn 1. When you have the adept, I think you play it in 99% of situations. Opponent had the Kudolta turn 1 here plus Hellahopper, pretty good start. But I find the Fury to clear the board a bit, play the second adept, and just start attacking. I play the Goyf as a 2-2. Next turn I can cycle the Hollow one, and I also top deck the Street Raid to make my Goyf large and to to grow my adepts, my opponent decides not to block, and I cycle another hollow one in response, which was exactly lethal. So that was the game. So let's check out the deciding game against Boros Convoke. I had to mulligan this one, of course, and had the Burning Inquiry with 2 hollow ones, which is pretty good if I can dodge discarding the hollow ones, of course. So I decide to go for it. I keep both of my hollow ones in hand, also discard one of the Vengevines, which make this hand basically perfect, and I put 12 power on turn 1, and my opponent immediately concedes. That was the game. Okay, so that was second win against Boros Convoke. Let's check out the next game. Match number 3 and win number 3. I mulligan first hand to the very decent 6 cards. Burning Inquiry, again, the hand this depending a lot on it. I discarded both of my Vengevines, hollow one stayed in my hand, so it ended up pretty good for me. Unfortunately, I didn't find a second creature at this point to bring back 2 of my Vengevines, and my opponent had the main deck Relic of Progenitus. But I was still able to put 7 power on the field, and I continued attacking my opponent, but they had a natural throne and they had a track task, which was just like a perfect hand for them against this deck. And I top decked Urbal Gurgov. It was great here and brought me immediately back into the game. Gave me Wander into the graveyard. Give all my creatures flying. So it gave me some chance. Um, I was able to then find Agonas with my Hedron Crab. Draw 3 more cards, leave the Wander in the graveyard, of course. And I went for the Inquiry but discard both of the hollow ones. Unfortunately, so I wasn't able to play it, but I had another go for the next turn. And my opponent plays the Steerings, plays the Karn, and finds the Graveyard Hate piece, which was it was really important for me because I had the Wanderer in the graveyard, and this moment really decided this game. So again, I played the Lorgoth for the double kicker, mill 6 cards, put another Ox in the graveyard, but my opponent top decked the Ulamog, and that was too much for me, and I conceded. Okay, so let's check out the next game. Started pretty good. That game I had a Hedron Crab in my hand. In a lot of situations I would just start off with the crab, but I also had a hollow one, and I really wanted to put a hollow one on turn 1 in the play. Turn 2 I went for the Neonate, tried to find a second land to bring back my Vengevines. Didn't find it, but I did find a second land on turn 3 to bring back one of my Vengevines and put my opponent on a 2 turn clock. Opponent plays the Steerings, but is not able to find a solution and concedes the game. Let's check out the last game. Was this last game? Sorry. Okay, yeah, my opponent starts with a Relic of Progenitus again. But sometimes when you have like Burning Inquiry and Hollow One, plus the Flameblade Adepts, sometimes you just don't actually need the graveyard. So my opponent, I was able to put Rootwalla and Hollow One on the battlefield on turn 1. If I was able to discard the Vengevine in the process, it would probably be the perfect hand. My opponent tapped out, which means I was able to bring back my Vengevine from the graveyard, and immediately attack for 5 damage here while putting Flameblade Adept as another good threat on the field. So I have a pretty good clock, and my opponent is still far from Tron. They find the Urza Tower, but I know they don't have other lands in hand. I play the Inquiry, I grow my Adept. In response, my opponent uses Relic, which was like unnecessary, but okay. I play my Rutvala with Madness, play the Hollow One, of course, and another creature, and just attack with everything I can, and hope my opponent doesn't top deck a third Tron land plus Eugene. That would be like probably, or yeah, the artifact that destroys everything. They need first definitely uh, third Tron piece to do this, and they go for the ancient stirrings but don't find anything, and that is the game. Okay, so that was a win 3, and let's now watch the win number 4, and then we'll go back to the game 1 and the loss, on the only loss in this league. Okay, so had to obviously mulligan that one, kept decent 6 cards, put Street Rate on bottom. I started with Flameblade Adept. When I can, in most situations, I start with the Adept, especially if I can follow it with a turn 2 discard cards. Unfortunately, I discarded my Hollow One, but I had the Ox, so it wasn't a big problem. I put a Wander in my graveyard, which is great. Not especially great here because my opponents don't actually play creatures, but in a lot of matchups it is great. So I continue attacking, and the Ox of Agonas on the field meant my opponent will definitely have a hard time dealing with it, and that's it. They decide to concede. Okay, so let's check out the game 2 against the Mono Black Coffers. It's not easy for them to deal with these recursive threats in game 1. Again, I start with Adept. I can follow it with turn 2 double Street Rate plus Inquiry, which is pretty good. I go for the double Street Rate cycle before doing the Burning Inquiry, and I play the double Rootwalla to bring back both of my Vengevines, which is basically it's basically lethal next turn, and a very bad situation for the opponent. I also pump one of my Rootwallas and play the lore. Also have opportunity to play the Hollow One for free, and while also hold Urborg Lurgoth as another threat in case they play like Damnation, something like that. And that's it. My opponent didn't have solutions for all of this, and that was the game. Okay, so let's now check out the defeat in match 1, also against Rhinos, I think. Had to mulligan the starting hand, and mulliganed it into pretty good hand. With this hand, I can go like turn 2 Neonate, discard Vengevine, cycle Street Rate, and cast the Hollow One for 1 mana, bringing back Vengevine. This is pretty good against most of the decks. Since I already had a very good turn to play, I decided to go for the turn 1 Hedron Crab. They really must deal with this. They didn't have a solution for it, so it put me in an even better situation. Just being able to dig for the second Vengevine can be really, really powerful. Okay, so they weren't able to kill the Hedron crab, so I got the two landfall abilities, which is of course a great situation when your opponent is not able to do this. I always fetch in response to the first ability. This way I don't put the land I want to find. I don't put it into the graveyard. And I was able to cast the second hollow one for 1 mana. Unfortunately, not able to cast the second hollow one, but at least I got the Vengevine back, which was the most important here anyway. And I was able to start attacking, put my opponent on a 13 life, and this means that they can play turn 3 rhinos, but they will have to defend themselves. They will have to block. So I get more opportunities to find the Yoks, and when I find the Yoks, if they don't have endurance, then Ox can really grind them very well. Okay, sometimes this when you do this replays, they just become slower. I don't know why, but again, I had two Hedron Crab triggers. I go for the lower, but my opponent decides to use the Force of Negation, exiling the Mystical Dispute, which was fine trade. They had their Rhinos resolving next turn, so it was really time for me to also put some more power on the field. I have one Vengevine in the graveyard, and I top decked the Oxagonus, which was definitely a card I was looking for. So I went for the Neonate, discard the Ox, also found other Ox with draw. Then I discard rest of my cards, also find a fetch to fill more of my graveyard. I get two more Hedron Crab abilities, putting two more Vengevines in the graveyard plus the second Ox, which is at this point very hard for my opponent to deal with. I also have the 15-16 Urborg Lurgoyf in my hand. And at this point I also have a Wonder, so all my creatures have flying, which means I can go for the lethal next turn. I can bring back 3 Vengevines, which is incredible. I just went for the Neonate to discard the Vengevine, then play the Urbal Gurgoyf with the Kicker ability, bring back 3 Vengevines, also mill 3 when it enters the battlefield. And that was the game opponent conceded. Let's switch to the game 2. Okay, in game 2, I decided to mull my starting one lander and had the Hedron had the turn 2 Neonate exile discard Vengevine and bring back Vengevine with the Hedron Crab, which is decent but not that great on the draw unless I find other things. So I go for the Steam Vents, of course. I play the Neonate, discard Vengevine, play my Havar Might. So some of the Rhinos lists play the Endurance as their graveyard hate, and some play Leyline of the Void. That is the reason why I bring in the Havar Mites, but I put it back on the sideboard on game 3 when I find out my opponent is playing Endurance, which they had in this situation, and my hand was definitely not great. I did get another Hedron Crab, cycled my street rate and went for the Inquiry, but opponent had a Force of Negation to deal with it. So it was not able to like it is definitely luck factor every time you play the inquiry. But yeah, like had like Vengevine in my hand that I really want to discard, and they had Charles, which I really want to try to discard from their hand. So if I successfully resolved that one, it could have ended up pretty good for me. But this way, they had too much stuff going on, and I wasn't able to find the ox on time. So that was the game. Let's check out the game 3. So the game 3 playing first, again had to mulligan into a definitely slower hand, just an inquiry without any payoffs. And unfortunately, it was a risk. It is always a risk with inquiry, of course, but I discarded my Urbel Gurgov, which was basically the only good card at this point. I did find the second inquiry and the adept, so that was something. But at this moment, no certain discard outlets for the Vengevine. So this put me in the situation where I really need some good top decks to be able to stay in this game. Opponent suspends the footfalls on turn 1. I decide just to go with the adept. Fetch, shock tapped, and just wait for the for the next turn to go with inquiry. Try to mess up with their hand if possible, and if they don't have force of negation, of course. Opponent just plays the second land, passes the turn. Yes, sometimes this is so irritating that these replays just take such a long time, and they mess up with the gameplay. Okay, so I find the Goblin lore here, so I had multiple options here, like going lore or going inquiry and try to top deck something playable. I decide to go for the lore, but opponent has the force of negation, which means they'll probably be resolving Rhinos next turn before I did anything serious. And they also had the bounce for the adept, which they already had one footfalls on the suspend, and if they can play the second one, this puts me in a pretty bad spot, definitely. So I really needed first a land, then some discard outlet for the Vengevine, or some luck with the Inquiry. But I didn't get any of those. I did get the hollow one, which can maybe get me out of this situation if I top deck well. Unfortunately, I didn't discard the Vengevine, so I didn't get it back. I discarded my Urbel Gorgov, which was also kind of unfortunate. Urbel Gorgov could be like pretty decent here. Maybe be just a big attacker blocker for the Rhinos, and also I could try to raise the Murktide with it. But this way they had 3 damage here, 9 damage in the air for the next turn. I'm not able to attack because they can block with the Murktide, and it was pretty much without a good top deck, it was a sealed game for me. So that was it. That was the entire league. And yeah, so after I think maybe a month playing this league, playing this deck again, and last time I played it, I had incredible results with it, and this time it still performs well. I really like it. I think this deck can do really good, and can be really a real competitor in the modern meta game. Of course, it can be even stronger with a few more additions, a few more printings of new cards, but I think it's already pretty good strategy that can win a lot of games and also have a lot of free wins. But definitely, this deck has luck factor when using Inquiry and the Goblin lore. So if luck is not on your side, you can do really bad, and if it is on your side, you can like do extremely well. So, um, but I think overall this deck is has a considerable power level. Okay, so that is it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the gameplay. If you want to help the channel, click like, click subscribe, and that's it for today. Goodbye.